All right, good morning. I'm glad you guys were all willing to brave the cold. It was tough, I'll be honest. You know, I was getting up, getting ready. I opened my door. I closed my door. I was like, I tried going out I did actually end up going out to the truck just in the little hoodie with the hood down. And I was like, that can't happen anymore. So I had to put that up. My ears had already pretty much broken off. It was crazy cold, but I'm glad that I was able to make it. Luckily, most of the roads are clear, right? My driveway, not so much. I about fell. That was a good time, but I made it, and so did you guys. And I'm really glad that you guys are able to join us as we continue our sermon series, Simon Says. And we've been looking at pretty much the life of Simon as he's been following Jesus, and we have been looking at some of the different lessons and some of the ways that we might be able to relate to him and see how Jesus worked to minister to him and to help him grow as he was walking along with Jesus. And that really relates a lot to us as we are kind of going through this life and trying to walk alongside with Jesus and always trying to get closer and closer to him and have our lives look more and more like his life. And so we are going to look at Simon's life yet again today. We've been in this series for a while. We've been looking at Simon. We've been hearing what Simon says, and I promise we're coming to the conclusion of the series. This sermon is kind of a little bit of a two-parter. So today's sermon, it's one part of Simon's story, but it's not the conclusion. So if you are willing to join us again next week, we are going to see kind of how this story of Simon's life completely comes to its close, and we're going to see that next week as we conclude our series. But before we jump into the text, I wanted to quickly ask and kind of take a quick little survey. How many of you guys are forgetful? Nobody here is as forgetful as I am. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'll be honest, even some of you wiser folks out in the audience. I already forgot, so I don't know. I beat you to the forgetting. I am a very forgetful person. Most of you guys, you already know that. You know that it takes, like 2 or 3 text message reminders. Hey, we have this going on. Hey, game night is coming up this Sunday, which is today. Hey, we have this going on at church. Hey, poor Danica is always the one that's like, you got to be there at this time. You got to be there. It's from this time to this time. She's the one who kind of helps keep me on track when it comes to like everything church related, and so I'm very appreciative and thankful for that. Her and Garrett doing an amazing job at keeping me on track. But I am a very forgetful person. But sometimes it's like the minor things that really don't matter too much, right? Sometimes it's the really major things that matter a whole lot. Are any of you guys in the same boat? Like, the really big things, no, you guys are all better than I am. You guys remember the big things, and it's the small things that you don't worry about. Me, I am a big thing forgetter kind of person. Do you ever have that, like, pang of guilt, and it just, it hits you in the gut when you remember the thing? Whatever the thing was, and you know that it was a really big thing, and then you forget it, and then it's like, sometimes you just have that big wake-up call, right? Like, maybe, here's an example. Maybe you're at work. And your boss, he tells you or she tells you that there's this thing that has to get done. It's this work project that you guys have been working on, and they're like, make sure you have it on my desk by lunchtime. Right, and so you're going and you're like, yep, got it. I'll have it on your desk by lunchtime, blah, 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 and you keep going, and you're going through work, and you're going through your day. Lunchtime hits, you go to, I don't know, the cafeteria or whatever you guys happen to have. You're on the road, driving to a place to grab lunch. You're breaking out the little lunch box, whatever it may be, and you take a bite into that sandwich or whatever you're eating, and immediately the second that the food touches your tongue, it's like a light bulb goes off, and you're like, oh no, I forgot to put that project on the boss's desk. And like you start to think like, now I can expect this long talk. Now I'm going to have to try to like apologize. Now I have to like do this, and we're going to have to worry about that. For me, it's always like, I have those moments all the time. I'll be sitting there and, you know, in college, I was really bad at it because I'm a terrible planner. And so I would have like really big papers that were coming up that were due, and, you know, I would just get caught up in the busy work of doing homework and other assignments for other classes. And then like a friend of mine would walk in, you know, to my room at 10 o'clock at night and be like, hey man, you know, did you get your paper written? Like, how do you think your paper's looking? And I'm like, what paper? And they're like, dude, we got a paper due tomorrow. And I'm like, oh. And then it just like clicks and the light goes off. As many of you guys know, I'm a really big movie person, and there's a really good scene in a Christmas movie that I just recently watched because you know it's Christmas time that like illustrates my life very well. Unfortunately, it's a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie called Jingle All the Way. I don't know if any of you guys have seen Jingle All the Way. To me, it's a lighthearted, funny kind of movie that's really dumb, that really depicts the craziness that is the Christmas season. And so Arnold Schwarzenegger, he plays this dad who is also this big-time businessman. And so he's always making phone calls, and he's, you know, all busy and, you know, going through life the way that busy business people do. And he gets home, and his son is absolutely obsessed with this character that he's been watching on TV called Turbo Man. And, you know, his son's been watching this, and the coolest, hottest toy that's coming out this Christmas season is the Turbo Man action figure. And maybe if you're a parent, you can kind of relate to, like, the stress that goes on when the new hot thing is coming out, and all of your kids want it, and you're, like, bending over backwards to try to make this dream purchase happen. And I'll never forget this scene plays out where him and his wife, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character and his wife, they're laying in bed, and the wife looks at him and says, "Hey, honey, you remembered to grab the Turbo Man, you know, action figure, right, from the store?" And Arnold Schwarzenegger does what most parents end up doing in this situation, who have completely forgotten to pick up the toy that he was supposed to get like 2 or 3 months ago, and he goes, Yeah. Don't even worry about it, honey. I got it. I got the toy. We're good to go. I got the little, you know, Turbo Man action doll, blah, blah, blah. And, like, he sounds like the Terminator while he's, like, saying all this. And, you know, and the wife responds, "Good. I'm glad you got it, because this close to Christmas, it's going to be impossible to find one." And that's within, like, the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie. The rest of the movie is him realizing the mistake, and you can just see that when she says it's going to be impossible to get one, he's like, yeah. And they're like laying in bed, he's trying to fall asleep, and his eyes just like go wide open, and he's like, oh no, because he realizes just how big of a mistake it is that he has forgotten what is unfolding. And today we find Simon in a similar situation. We're going to see Simon, and unfortunately Simon is in this situation where it's not something as small as picking up a little action figure. It's not even as small as forgetting to submit a little project to your boss. It's not something as small as, you know, turning in a paper to your professor. It's something that is very, very, very large and a very big deal, and he is just forgetful about what he's been told is going to happen. Last week, we looked at Jesus and the washing of the feet, and we see Simon's response to Jesus trying to wash his feet. And today, we are going to continue looking at the Last Supper, where we find Jesus interacting with his disciples, and we see all of the shenanigans. And so that's kind of the groundwork that we're working with when it comes to this situation and this conversation that Jesus has to have with Simon. And The foot washing has kind of happened, and what I love about the situation is we're going to be in Luke chapter 22, and Luke chapter 22, it lays out the Last Supper, and it shows all of these different events that are happening during the Last Supper. And one of the unfortunate things that happens is they start discussing about, the benefits of the Lord's Supper and why the Lord's Supper has to be taken and what the bread resembles and all of these important things. And Jesus makes mention of somebody who's going to betray him. And we know that to be Judas, but they don't know that at the time. And so they start debating about who is going to be the one to, turn Jesus in, who's going to be the one who's going to betray Jesus, who's the little scoundrel who's going to, do this really terrible thing. And they start debating that. And I love the way that Luke paints out this gospel account of the Lord's Supper, because they go from one debate right into the next debate. And so they go from one debate about who is going to be the worst one of them all, who's going to betray Jesus and turn him over to the authorities? Who could that possibly be? And then they go right into, well, now that we've debated who's the worst, who's the best? We got to have that conversation. Right after hearing Jesus say, I'm going to die, one of you is going to turn me in, they're like, who's it going to be? It can't be me. Lord, it won't be me, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, well, while we're on the topic of who's the worst, which one of us is better than all the others? And that's where we find Simon in this really weird situation. And I can't help but think that at some point during this debate, Simon is like, well, let's remember, everybody, I'm the rock. You guys y'all are cool, and you got James and John, y'all are the sons of thunder. That's a cool nickname, but y'all aren't the Rock, which if you guys are WWE people, you know how cool of a name the Rock is, right? That's awesome. But that's kind of where I envision this whole conversation is going. And Jesus has to correct these crazy disciples of his. And this is the conversation that he has with Simon. We're going to be looking at Luke chapter 22, starting in verse 31. This is what Jesus says. He says, Simon, Simon, look out. Satan has asked to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And you, when you have turned back, you strengthen your brothers. Lord, he told him, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. I tell you, Peter, he said, the rooster will not crow today until you deny 3 times that you know me. Oof. That's got to be a pretty hard truth pill to swallow, right? In the middle of this debate of who here is the best, and Simon is probably making his case for why he's at least in the top 3, Jesus is like, actually, just so you know, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. I can't help but think about the situation that Job finds himself in the Old Testament, where Satan goes to God and asks, about Job. And starts to say, I bet I could, he starts to make this little deal with God in the Old Testament concerning Job, and he starts talking about how, I bet even your faithful servant Job, I bet I could break him. I bet I could make him, reject knowing you. I bet I could make him give up on you. I bet that I could turn him, let's have this little bet. The only reason that Job actually really cares about you that much is because look at all the ways that you've blessed him and the ways that you've protected him. Why don't you just get rid of that protection and let me have my way with him? And, we'll see if he still continues on in his faith to you, God. And so God says, okay, you're welcome to put my servant Job to the test. I can't help but wonder if that's what Simon's thinking when he hears that he's about to be sifted like wheat, and that his teacher, his rabbi, his Christ, his Messiah himself has prayed on behalf of Simon that he would not lose faith. And Simon, being the hard-headed, stubborn person that we have always seen him to be pretty much this entire series, he looks and he says, Lord, that's not me. Trust me, God. Trust me, Jesus. I will go with you to whatever end. I'll go with you to prison. I'll go with you to death. It doesn't matter where you're going, Jesus. I'm there with you. You need me to chop off some ears? We can do that. You need me to do this? We can do that. You need me to pull a sword and fight some Romans? We can do that. They can kill me. They can put me in prison. They can torture me. They can do whatever they want to me. I'm with you until the very end. And Jesus looks at him and he says, actually, before the rooster even crows today, you are going to deny me 3 times. And I can't help but wonder what Simon's reaction is to that. We all know how stubborn and hard-headed he is. I can't help but wonder if Simon is like, no, that'll never be me. Don't forget, Jesus, they all voted me, most valuable disciple. I got the MVD award at this, conversation, this debate that we were having. They all said, even James and John, I was able to convince them that I'm the best. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest of all time, of all disciples. I'm the Rock. I'm the WWE superstar. I win the Royal Jam. I win all of it. When it comes to Super Bowls of being a disciple, that's me. I'm the winner. That can't be me. I can't be the one who denies you. That's not me. I'm sure that's probably exactly what Simon is kind of going through. And as the story continues to unfold, the Last Supper, it concludes. They put all the plates away, they clean up their mess, and they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is going to pray, and he's going to ask that the cup that has been given and distributed to him might be removed. If there's some way that God could possibly, take this cup away, he prays that it would happen. And if you guys are familiar with the story, his disciples, they're supposed to be keeping watch. And they keep falling asleep, Simon included. They fall asleep while Jesus is going through one of the hardest points of his entire ministry, of his entire life up to this point. And according to Luke's gospel, he starts to sweat, and the sweat as he's praying and as he's really thinking about what's going to come upon him and the fate that awaits him, as he's thinking about the pain and the excruciation that he's going to end up going through. He starts to sweat, and his sweat turns to blood. It becomes like blood. And he's so disappointed at his disciples who think that now's the perfect time for a nap, Simon included. The one who would go to the ends of the world with Jesus, the one who's going to face death, face persecution, face hardship, face imprisonment, the one who's going to go and do anything that Jesus asks, can't even stay awake. I think us, as we are reading and looking at this whole situation unfold, I think we can see that this denial, it's coming. The guy can't even stay awake. And then Judas comes and hands Jesus over to the Romans, and Simon's real quick to cut the ear off of one of the servants that came with the soldiers. He's real quick to swing a sword, real quick to fall asleep, real quick to try to fight back to stop this from unfolding. But then as Jesus is arrested, taken into custody, beaten, persecuted, interrogated, we see what really happens when it comes to Simon's, bravado. We see the reality of where Simon finds himself. We're going to be picking up again in Luke chapter 22. We're going to be picking it up in verse 54. It says this, "They seized him being Jesus, led him away, and brought him into the high priest's house. Meanwhile, Peter was following at a distance." Notice the distance there. Not right next to his Lord that he said he'd go to the ends of the earth with. They lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, and Peter sat among them. When a servant saw him sitting in the light and looked closely at him, she said, "This man was with him too." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him." After a little while, someone else saw him and said, "You're one of them too." "Man, I am not," Peter said. About an hour later, another kept insisting, "This man was certainly with him, since he's also a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Immediately, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Then the Lord turned and looked at Peter. So Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. What an unfortunate circumstance to find Simon in. Satan has gone to try to sift Simon, to try to break him down, to try to take him from the hand of God, to put him to the test. And Jesus prays on his behalf that his faith would be strengthened, that he would be able to come back from this, that he'd be able to regain his faith, regain his strength, and then strengthen and embolden his brothers and sisters and all of the other fellow believers. That's what Jesus prays on Simon's behalf. And yet Simon still denies ever having known him. As Jesus is being hauled away, Simon follows at a distance, keeping his eye to try to see what might happen, see what they're going to do to his Lord. And then as this continues to unfold, and as he gets a little closer, he doesn't want to get too close. He doesn't want to be too easily recognizable. So he stands and, kind of faces, but kind of is turning away, I would venture to guess, and, looking to see what's kind of unfolding with Jesus. And he's at this fire pit, and, he's just standing there. And some woman sees him and is like, Hey, I've seen you somewhere. Hey, you were with that guy, the one they just hauled off. And Simon's like, No, that wasn't me. I promise that wasn't me. You've got me confused with someone else. And he's staring into the fire, trying to stay warm probably. And then somebody else, he sees him and he's like, "Wait a second. Hey, no. That lady's right. You are the one. You're one of the ones. You're the rock. You're the one who was supposed to be, really cool. You're the best of all of the disciples. You're the greatest of all of them." And Simon says, No. That's not me. I'm not the greatest. I'm not even one of them. You've got me confused with someone else. And then somebody else is like, No. You're a Galilean. Just like the guy they hauled away. I've seen you before. You were there when that guy healed the leper. You were there when that guy healed the blind man. You were there when that guy told somebody to pick up his mat and walk. You were there. I saw you. I saw you throughout his ministry. And Simon says, "You've got the wrong guy. It wasn't me. I wasn't there. I don't follow that guy. I don't even know him." The rooster crows, and he takes one more look at Jesus, and Jesus is just staring at him. Oof. That'd be a rough place to find yourself, don't you think? The one that you called Christ, the one that you called Messiah, the one who helped you to walk on water, the one who saved you from drowning, the one who has been constantly trying to lift you up, the one who's been constantly trying to mentor you, to encourage you, to strengthen you, the one who called you the rock, the one who loved you dearly. And you pretend like you don't know him, and he's just staring at you as you deny. Imagine if it was a friend of yours. I think it could be kind of easy for us to be like, to not know how to put ourselves in those shoes because, well, we're not Peter and we weren't actually walking with Jesus. But think about somebody that you love. Think about somebody that you care about. Let's make this more personal. Think about a good friend. Any of you guys have like teachers that you really kind of look up to when you were in school? Some of you that might have been a while, but then you're wise. Anybody that you look up to? Imagine seeing them hauled off. Imagine seeing, one of our local Bell police officers pull up to their house, knock on the door, put them in handcuffs, toss them in the back seat of the car. And people are like, hey, weren't you friends with him? Didn't you know him? Didn't you know her? Wasn't she one of your teachers? And you're like, no, I don't know who that is. And somebody else is like, no, you know who that is. We had that teacher in the second grade together. And you're like, no, I wasn't even in that class. I didn't move here until third grade. And then somebody else is like, no, you know who that is. And you're like, no, I've never seen them a day in my life. And then they look at you through the window of the police car. And you make eye contact with them. And you just know. You're reminded. Those memories, they flash through your head of the times that you spent together. That's where we find Simon at this point in time. Probably remembering the entirety of their ministry together for the past 3-ish years. The times where they walked together, they laughed together, they cried together, the times where he learned about forgiveness, the times where he learned about having faith, the times where he learned about who Jesus truly was when he called him the Christ. All of these things probably flash right through his mind, just like it does to us sometimes when we're forgetful and we have that one moment where something just reminds us of all the things that we had forgotten. And then it hits us like a truck. Simon finds himself at the lowest point that he's ever been. And it says that when this unfolds and all of this happens, he goes, he leaves, and he weeps bitterly. He weeps bitterly. These aren't happy tears. These are tears of sorrow, of guilt, of shame. Because he's reminded that Jesus told him, you will deny me. Simon, Peter, the rock, you're going to mess it all up. You're going to mess up. Satan, he's already coming for you. And I'm just praying that you're going to be restored. But Satan's coming for you. And Simon's like, no, Satan wouldn't come after me. And Jesus basically tells him, Simon, Satan's already got you. You will deny me. It will happen. I think we find Simon in a place that a lot of us can relate to. Maybe not necessarily denying Jesus. I think if we're being honest, for the most part, We're not always necessarily put in the same kind of situation that Simon finds himself in, where he might literally lose his life for being associated with Jesus. In the United States of America, we're pretty blessed to not really have to wrestle with that. But I think if we're being honest, sometimes we try to, as the song would say, hide it under a bushel. This little light of ours. We try to hide it, conceal it, put it under something so that the people around us, they might not feel too uncomfortable by the things that we believe, the things that we say, the things that we proclaim. We don't want to make people feel awkward when it comes to the meals that we're sharing. We might not really want to pray out in public when it comes to, even just blessing, and thanking God for the food that's on our table. We don't necessarily want to do that because, the people around us, they might feel uncomfortable. They might look at us a different way. They might judge us. They might think that we're too churchy. They might think that we're this or we're that. I think sometimes we might not flat out deny Jesus. We might not have people asking, do you believe in Jesus? And we say, no, we don't. But I think sometimes with the way that we live our life, people wouldn't know that we do. I think sometimes we do that, we sin, we make mistakes, we mess up, right? Anybody here that doesn't apply to them? Never made a mistake, ever? Just me? Okay, I'm kidding. But we find ourselves in situations just like Simon. And I would encourage you guys, myself included, this isn't just like a you guys thing, it's a me thing too. That we would look for the reminders, that we would look for the things that remind us that we are not on the path that we were called to walk. I would call it like maybe road signs. You're ever driving somewhere and you're like, I don't think that road sign, I don't think I recognize it. I don't think I'm actually supposed to be on this road. You type it into your GPS and you're like, oh man, I'm 12 hours off of, where I was supposed to be. Maybe not 12, but maybe not you guys 12. 12 sometimes for me. But I would call it that. You could call it a rooster. There are little, alarms that occasionally go off in our heads. I would call it the convicting work of the Holy Spirit, maybe. Maybe he's working through a rooster. Maybe he's working through a road sign. Maybe he's working through a phone call from your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother, and they're just asking, hey, how are things going? Hey, are you maybe living the way you should? Maybe it's a coworker who says, that really wasn't a good way to handle that situation. Hey, maybe you shouldn't have said that to the person that you said that to. Hey, maybe when it came to interacting with your boss, maybe you should have been a little bit more gracious. Or maybe you're the boss and you're interacting with one of your underlings. Maybe you could have been a little bit more gracious. Hey, the way that you interacted with that waitress was kind of rude. Hey, the way that you did this or the way that you handled that, it just wasn't maybe really the way that Christ would handle that situation. Maybe somebody's telling you, hey, what would Jesus do if he was in your situation? Maybe those little things are the rooster that crows to remind you that you are off base and that you have ventured and strayed from the path that Jesus asked you to walk. My encouragement and my point for the sermon is this, if we can go ahead and put it up. Listen for your rooster and then check yourself. Listen for your rooster and then check yourself. Oftentimes when we feel that slight little pain of guilt, of shame, sometimes it's not just regular guilt and shame. Sometimes it's conviction from the Spirit to show that you have veered, to show that you've gone off the path. And friends, I tell you the truth. Jesus' prayer for Simon is the same prayer for you. That you would not lose faith just because you veer off the path. That you would not lose faith, but that you would be reestablished. that you would be strengthened, that you would be brought back, that your little Holy Spirit version of GPS would guide you back to the road that you need to be on. And then in turn, you can strengthen and encourage the people that you see going off the path. That you could strengthen and encourage the people that you see are lagging behind a little. Friends, the journey of faith, it's a road. There's a starting point and there's a finish point. There's a place that we're all trying to get to. And honestly, this little journey that we call faith, it's a caravan. Any of you guys big on caravans? I don't know, maybe you like to road trip with like a bunch of people. You all take a bunch of vehicles. Have you guys ever done that? Like, am I the only one who's ever had to do that? You know, you got people following cars. Am I the only one? Oh my gosh. You guys need more friends. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so like, I don't know, envision an army thing. You know, you see all the Humvees and they're all going in one place. I can't believe I'm the only one who's ever caravanned. I'm just going to throw that out there. That kind of surprises me. I thought maybe we all, you know, we're all going to a destination together. But I guess I'm the only one who does that. But most of you, you're familiar at least with the concept of caravanning. So, in case you're not, I'm going to teach you good caravanning etiquette should you find yourself in that situation. You have your lead car who's supposed to know where they're going, and as supposed to, not always, but they're supposed to. The rest of the cars, they're expected to kind of follow, right? They follow suit. The lead car is supposed to kind of check rear view mirrors to make sure that everybody's still following, that they haven't gotten lost in traffic, that they haven't taken a wrong exit. And then you have that's your lead car. Then you have your rear car. In train terms, it would be your caboose. They're the ones who are kind of like the little sheep herders that make sure that like the other cars in between them and the lead car haven't veered off the path. They're supposed to kind of help, you know, make sure that everybody's going where they're supposed to go. Friends, that's the faith journey. That's the way that our faith is supposed to be played out. We all have a destination that we're trying to get to. We all are trying to look more and more like Christ. We are all trying to get closer and closer to the Father. And Jesus made that possible. He died on a cross so that you and I, we could be saved, we could be redeemed from our sin, we could live a righteous life, we could start to pursue righteousness. He is that lead car. He is the lead car. He paved the way. He made the way. He set the route. He set the destination. And He wants us to follow Him so that we can get there. We are just individual cars following His lead. And it's on us to help make sure that all the other cars, they're not getting lost in traffic. They're not veering off to the side. They're not getting stranded. They're not having blowout tires. They're not having all of these road hazards. They're not taking the wrong exits. And if they are, we're supposed to be helping them reroute and helping them get back onto the route that Jesus has paved for us. That's what Jesus prays on Peter's behalf. But first, Peter had to realize that he himself had veered off. He had to realize that he himself had made the mistake. That he had wandered from the path. And when he found that reminder, whether it was, you know, a road that wasn't marked on the little map that he was following, whether it was the GPS telling him, no, you've got to veer back. Here's how you took a detour. You can get back on the road. He had to realize that he had gone the wrong way. And before we can help people get back on the right path, we have to do the same thing. We have to examine ourselves and make sure that we ourselves are on the right path. A certain parable might stick out to you. that Jesus told. Something about a guy who has a speck in his eye and one guy who has a log in his own eye. And the guy with the log in his eye tries to help the person who has a speck. And Jesus says, pull the log out of your own eye, and then you can help the person who's got the speck. Friends, that's the way that our faith is supposed to be played out. I pray that as we leave here, that we would recognize the rooster's crow, that we would see the things that we have done that have strayed from the way of truth, that have strayed from the way of grace, that have strayed from the way that Jesus paved for us, so that we can get back on track and then in turn help those around us. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for this day that you've given us. God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for its truth. God, I thank you for Simon's example. God, I thank you for your son. I thank you that he desires goodness and greatness for us. God, that he came on this earth and he died on a cross and he rose from the dead so that he could pave the way to you. God, I pray that we would follow his way, follow his lead. God, and I pray that if and when we stray from that path, if and when we stray from the way, if and when we find ourselves out of line, God, I pray that we would just listen for whatever rooster crow you might be giving to us. God, for whatever reminder you might be sending, God, I pray that we would hear it, we would recognize, and we would remember and see that we have strayed. God, I pray that it would be a reminder that we have gone the wrong way and that it's time to turn back. God, I pray that we would be people of repentance. God, I thank you for your salvation that you have freely given to us because of the work of your Son, Jesus. God, I pray that we would just continue to follow his example. God, I pray that we would also help others to do the same. God, it's in his name, the name of your Son, Jesus, that I pray. Amen. As per usual, this will be the time of invitation. We'll have one final song. If you have any prayer requests, any praises that you would like to lift up, any decisions that you would like to make, this will be the time to do so. And just another quick reminder, I know that sometimes I say it, sometimes I don't, but if you're not comfortable coming up front, that's totally okay. You're more than welcome to catch me in the back at some point after the service is ended. This is not like the only time that I'm willing to pray for you, so if you guys want to just pull me aside, that's more than okay. But this will be the time to make some of those decisions, or again, you can pull me to the side after service.